Switzerland is the most impenetrable country on the planet, and this has been the case for centuries. For a long time, no one has dared to try. Even Hitler was hesitant to invade Switzerland, and knowing what we now know, we completely understand his hesitation. It's not so much that they'll be angry as it is that if anyone chooses to go to war with Switzerland, they'll have to deal with bombs. They will not, however, be aimed at the enemy. Instead, the Swiss will use these bombs to target themselves. Obviously, they will not bomb their own cities where people live. Instead, they will bomb their magnificent infrastructure. You name it, roads, bridges, and tunnels. Switzerland has explosives in every piece of infrastructure leading into the country. This may sound insane, and it is, but Switzerland is serious about staying out of conflicts. And because there are only a few ways to get into Switzerland by land due to the mountains that surround the majority of the country, the Swiss saw this as a golden opportunity to create what they saw as a necessary defense mechanism in order to keep Hitler out. And they did. However, one of the reasons Switzerland was never conquered by big European superpowers when they were expanding right on their doorstep is that those same European superpowers decided it would be a good idea to have a buffer zone between them. Switzerland became that buffer zone and has remained a neutral power in the heart of Europe ever since. By neutral, I mean insanely neutral. They are not a member of the NATO or the EU, and they only joined the UN 19 years ago. They do not send troops to fight in any wars, despite the fact that they are extremely skilled fighters. As evidenced by their history, other European nations used to hire Swiss soldiers to fight in wars. But that ended when they lost a major war to France a few hundred years ago. Switzerland no longer fights, but they can still raise an army of around 800,000 people in an instant. And even though they are unlikely to ever fight in a war, the Swiss army is, to put it mildly, quite remarkable. Switzerland does not have an army. Switzerland is an army, as the saying goes. This refers to the fact that all Swiss men are required to serve in the military. But that's not even the most bizarre part. Everyone who served in the mandatory military service up until 2007 kept all of their equipment. They still had their uniforms, rifles, and ammunition. So if a war broke out, they'd be able to put on their military uniforms at home, strap their assault rifles to their backs, and head straight to the battlefield. In some ways, it's insanely brilliant, but mostly it's insane, and the insanity doesn't stop there. Have you ever wondered what the Swiss might be keeping hidden in their mountains? Could it be gold or money, which they are most likely concealing in there? But somewhere in Switzerland, deep within a mountain, there is a secret airbase where multiple FA-18 Hornets await orders. Consider a Swiss Air Force pilot starting the engines of an FA-18 Hornet inside a mountain, behind camouflage doors, preparing to take off and launch a surprise attack on an unsuspecting adversary. That could be on his way to bomb Switzerland right now, but he has no idea that a fighter jet has just been released from the inside of a mountain to take him out. I'm not sure. It just seems like something out of a James Bond movie to me, and I'm not sure where exactly this base is located because it's highly classified information. Chances are enemies will not notice until it's too late. We only know about the existence of this airbase because Swiss soldiers have occasionally mentioned it on social media. However, they have always been asked to remove any mention of the airbase as soon as possible, and a senior Swiss officer has stated, the name and location of the airbase are highly classified information. But knowing the Swiss, I'm less concerned with where it is and more concerned with how many there are, because there is most likely more than one. On the other hand, there are an abundance of bunkers. When Hitler took over most of Europe, the Swiss realized they needed a place to retreat to in case Hitler chose to invade, especially since the majority of the population lives in flat and easily maneuverable terrain, which is a bad thing in wartime. They went to the mountains to build bunkers and tunnels, and while these bunkers were obviously never used for what they were intended for, they are now used for anything from aging rooms for cheese to hotels and high-tech server boards, where you can store information that requires that extra level of security. Yet bunkers aren't confined to the Swiss mountains. For a long time, it was required by law in Switzerland that when you built a house, it had to have a bunker large enough to accommodate all of the people living in that house. The law has since been reversed slightly, and it now specifies that every inhabitant must have a safe place that is easily accessible from their place of abode. So basically, you need to either create a nuclear-proof bunker in your basement or pay for entry to a community bunker and have a reserved spot in one of them. What's odd is that these bunkers haven't been utilized and are unlikely to be used in the future. They are typically used as storage chambers by the Swiss. You are aware that you must ensure the safety of your wine in the event that a nuclear bomb is dropped on your country or enemy tanks arrive at your door. Tanks? As if they could ever get near to Swiss soil. Don't you believe the Swiss have already considered this? Of course they have. Remember the explosives I mentioned earlier? You know, the ones they put in place to, if necessary, destroy all avenues into Switzerland? If enemy tanks get beyond it, first and foremost, congratulations. And secondly, you now have to deal with these. Tank traps are what they're called. These are long lines of giant concrete blocks that are specifically designed to block out tanks. And if you go to the French-speaking region, Suy-Roman, along the Swiss side of the lake between Geneva and Lausanne, you'll find these lines of tank traps that stretch all the way from the lakeside into the mountains. And do you see these houses? They're actually bunkers disguised as houses. And the Swiss hid cannons here, which they might use if the enemy tried to go over the tank traps. Yet, the cannons would not be aimed directly at the tank. Instead, they would be aimed at the tank's belly, where there was little armor. It's brilliant, but also terrifying. Yet, I found this one incident in which Switzerland threatened Germany to be a little more alarming. You've probably heard of the Rhine River. Its headwaters are in Switzerland, and it flows through a huge portion of Western Germany before reaching the Netherlands. What's terrible is that Switzerland threatened to poison the Rhine, and hence all of Germany's water, if they were a bit more aggressive. Fair play, but this clearly never happened, at least not on purpose. Switzerland did, after all, poison the Rhine in the 1980s. Although this was considered an accident, but it demonstrates the Swiss determination to preventing opponents from even considering attacking their country. What is strange is that Hitler had a very thorough plan to invade Switzerland, and while he considered it as a challenge, he knew it could be done. So why didn't he do it? It's a complicated matter, but both the Swiss and historians disagree on why Hitler didn't invade them. Some people believe that the powerful Swiss military graduate strategy and the Alps saved them. Some claimed it was due to the Nazis' preference to banquet them, so they just allowed them to remain neutral as a result. Historians believe that both were required, and that another key factor was that Germany was having difficulty in Russia. Germany could easily have invaded Switzerland, but it would have required far too many resources, which Germany simply could not afford to lose at this point in the war. Since their Russian mission ran into some poor luck, cooperation with Switzerland was also beneficial to the Germans, as Switzerland was required to deliver resources on credit to Germany, which they did not have to pay for upfront as part of a contract. Furthermore, Germany may sell its gold to the Swiss state bank in return for foreign currency, without having to prove its origin. This allowed them to sell gold plundered from countries they had invaded. In exchange, Switzerland could stay out of the war and continue dealing with friends for food and coal, both of which they desperately needed. After the war's end, these issues have become highly contentious. I don't have an opinion on this, but if Switzerland had not done these things, they would not have been the neutral nation they are now. Hence, the Swiss independence and neutrality are the outcome of a variety of reasons. Above all, the Swiss ensured that no party in a battle would benefit from attacking them. It is the mindset they have maintained to this day. They're not as crazy about it now as they were back then. For example, the Swiss military declared in 2014 that all bombs and explosives had been removed from its infrastructure. That's probably for the best, Switzerland. Bunkers and tank traps, on the other hand, remain. Because you never know when those could come in handy. But after all, Switzerland remains the most impenetrable country on the planet due to its continued commitment to remain neutral.